So let's go ahead and cut now to Mr. Mark Edward, a friend for many years, a former Skeptologist alumnus, and who was just here in town about a week ago, giving us a live talk about the project that he and Susan Gerbic are working on. Do, 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 do. Do, do, do. Can you all sing it with me? Do, do, do. Hey, there he is.
Hi there.
Hey, Mark, how you doing, sir?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Doing okay. Thank you for joining us. We're getting some bounce back. Do we need to do something?
On his end.
Can you, no, he can't mute, can he? We're dealing with it. We're dealing with it. Never mind, Mark, we're good. So, thank you for coming in here and joining us on our 13-hour video live stream marathon. By the way, it's an insane thing to do. Don't ever try it. We just realized we're only 3.5 hours into 13 hours.
Well, you have coffee, don't you?
No, we don't have coffee, and the reason is caffeine makes my voice get all constricted, and it's already going to be in bad enough shape as it is. I don't need to make it any worse.
Okay.
So I wanted to talk to you about a few projects that we've worked on together. Of course, we started off, we met when we worked on Skeptologists together, where you were our mentalism expert, and actually you were our magician expert as well on that show. And then, Weird or What? The William Shatner show, where they had you do a seance, and they had me come in and watch and comment on the seance.
That's right.
Now, let's start with the Skeptologists. Can we bring up photo number 16 Skeptologists? I have a crew here. I can just say the name of a photograph and it magically appears. Oh wait, that's seance. That's toga.
You're out of order. There you are.
There we go. So this shot is from the Skeptologists. Can you see this picture, Mark?
Yes.
So this is you are holding what appears to be dry ice because you're wearing some gloves, and Phil Plate is holding the thermal camera on you. And in my memory, I have no idea what we were doing in this scene. Can you explain this to us? What?
I don't even recognize myself, but yeah, that's me. I thought it was Ryan Johnson for a second there.
Do you know what you're doing here?
Yeah, we were doing a thermo thing to show how the vapors from dry ice look amazingly like ghosts. And also just to show that if we took this, I think it was like $50,000 camera down into the bowels of the Queen Mary, we would be able to see cold spots or something like that. That's what I remember.
I remember playing with that camera between shots and shining it around up on the walls in one of the holds of the Queen Mary, and yeah, there's lots of cold spots, lots of hot spots too, spots for just about everything. This
anywhere there's electricity hooked in.
Yeah, those are always hot. So this one was at this was in a studio. This wasn't on the Queen Mary, was it? Yeah, because we had the candelabra.
No, I think it was that was at CFI, and I think that's just dry ice. So,
what was the idea behind seeing what the vapor from the dry ice was doing? What were we trying to demonstrate?
It was your show. I just did what you guys told me.
I assume it was your trick, though. No?
Okay. No, it wasn't a trick. It was just you guys were just fascinated with the heat sensor on the camera. So we were shooting the candle flame. I remember that, and then showing the difference between that and the dry ice.
Oh, okay. I do remember that.
How it worked into the show, I am not quite remembering, and my brain cells are not what they used to be.
I think all we were doing was showing what a thermal camera is, and because back then, 10 years ago, not everyone had seen all the ghost hunting shows yet, and they didn't all know what they were.
No, they didn't have the kind of budget we had, right?
So let's switch to 16 Seance. Can we do that? So this picture here. Then you certainly remember this. This was
this was a great moment.
Yeah.
For me.
Do you want to tell us what you're doing here in this shot?
Well, what we did is they wanted to recreate the skull seances, which we could talk about for a long time, but basically they were had no controls on them. So what we did is we found the studio and we completely blacked it out, which is kind of a prerequisite for a seance in the Victorian style. And then we brought in people who were, most of them were neither believers nor non-believers, and we sat them at this table, and then we had a complete blackout, and all sorts of crazy things happened, even though they were holding my hands. And a lot of people got really freaked out. I mean, this is an infrared shot, so the infrared camera was running, and I have a collection of stills where, particularly the lady here on the right, she was hysterical.
Yeah.
And at the end, she had to be calmed down, I think by you, if I'm not mistaken.
No. What happened was you're right. She had to be calmed down, but she eventually left. But I'm not sure if I had gotten there yet. But what happened while I was there was you had already left, and she came back to the studio by herself.
Yeah.
Came into the building, wandered around, and found where we were, and just wanted to find the director. And she was just bawling in full tears, and she just had to hug the director and said this was the most profound and moving experience that she'd ever had in her whole life.
You should put that on camera. Well, one of the great things that happened with her, and these again are things, this is why I do what I do, because what happened was she told me, I think, or somebody right before, that she was deathly afraid of spiders. And we said, oh, don't worry, there's not going to be any spiders involved. But what happened is, this is this old warehouse in downtown LA that we did it. And at the end of the seance, when everything had happened and the lights came back up, a spider had come down from the ceiling and was crawling right towards her on the table. So, I mean, yeah, she was hysterical. But again, this was nothing that I had planned. It just happened. So there you go. See.
What were some of the things that you? Well, first of all, let me ask you: were you intending to deceive these people? Were you intending that they were going to believe that this was a real seance, or were you showing them how you were doing what you were doing?
No, I wasn't showing anybody how I was doing it. We were trying to do the same sort of test conditions, so-called, that the skull seance was supposedly set up to do. But the idea was to interview them beforehand and ask them, how do you feel about this kind of thing? And then do it afterwards and interview them and say, now how do you feel? But with no explanation. And, of course, most of the people who were not believers, by the end, they were believers. But that was the point of the show. The show was, this is a magician. This is what he does for a living. But we didn't tell the participants that. We just told them that they're going to a seance. So that's something, again, that's kind of up to the producer and the production staff to clear up with the waivers or the forms that they sign. But that was the way they wanted it to go. And I think to be quite honest, if we had done a disclaimer and said this is all going to be tricks done by a mentalist, magician, who works and does this for a living, I don't think we would have had the same effect.
Right.
Which was at the end, some of the people who were undecided or non-believers were pushed emotionally. See, that's the thing. They were emotionally they bought into it. And I know you personally, I don't think you really like that part of it. But again, this is what the problem is television wants this kind of thing, and they don't always do their homework to find out what this might psychologically do to the people who are participating in it. Because the last thing the producer has time to do is rush out and hug this woman and say, hey, we just made all this stuff up. And what I have found in my work is that even when you do that, they will say, well, That other stuff was a trick. But that spider, there's no way he could have known about spiders because I only mentioned it right before the lights went out. So, it's a hard thing to do to win with this sort of production. I'm really hoping that we can come up on a way that doesn't look like we are making fun of people, but that we're actually interested in how or why they can turn so quickly just because it's a magic trick in the dark.
I mean, I was fully in support of this one, but I mean, the reason is that it wasn't just fooling people with a seance and leaving it at that. It was because then what they had me do is they had me come in and observe everything, watching it on the infrared camera, and comment on what was happening. Now, our mutual friend Susan was, of course, your assistant in this, and she's going to be on in a couple hours, and I've got some pictures of her doing her stuff in the dark, and we'll talk about all the specifics of what she was doing.
Had a blast.
Yeah, so we'll talk about all that then. But
okay,
what I thought was great about this particular episode was that it did give us the opportunity to show how easily these people could be fooled with some tricks that, I mean, frankly, they're embarrassing. Look at that. That's a nice shirt, sir.
Skeptic t-shirt.
These shirts are available at skeptoid.com/store.
Wait, I'm trying to get it so you can see it.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. That's the famous science is better than pseudoscience design with the rocket and the ghost.
I want everybody to see it. So it's, science. Wait.
Other side.
Science is better than pseudoscience.
Yep, that's it. That's the one you said you wanted. Didn't get the order yet for you.
Anyway, I thought I'd give you a plug there.
Thank you.
I interrupted.
Yeah. So anyway, they had me come in and explain what everyone was doing, and then when the show aired, of course, they kind of walked it back a little bit because they gave us the opportunity to show and expose everything about how these things are faked, and then when the show airs, Shatner came on with his narration, and I know Shatner doesn't write the narration. I'm not pointing the finger at him by any stretch. But he was saying, therefore, Dunning thinks that this proves that all seances are fake, which of course is completely wrong. I mean, I believe all seances are fake, but but I certainly don't believe that doing one experiment shows that all of them are done that way.
Right, but the thing is, in the context of the rest of the show, which I really like, Shatner is continually making fun of himself and his own fears. Remember when his cat jumps up on his lap, and he says, he's kind of doing a disclaimer by just being himself.
Yeah.
He does challenge. He doesn't really. I mean, he doesn't make bold statements as if they're facts. But when you watch the whole show, you get this feeling that it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. But, again, I think it was one of those at the end where they said, you decide, which both you and I have learned to dislike because I think we're past that era in television, and now it has to be, don't just resist, insist that, if you want to show both sides, I'm not into it. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, the whole... You decide the false balance thing, show that 2 + 2 = 4, and then show that 2 + 2 = 5, and then tell the viewer you decide, and whichever one you decide is okay.
It might equal 5,
Yeah.
It's that shadow of a doubt that just, it's like, no, we know enough now, and science would know if there were, well, I think science would know if ghosts were walking around. Maybe I'm wrong.
You would think we would at least have established properties for what a ghost is, what it's made of, how you detect it, how you measure it, what it weighs.
Right.
So can we put up a photo? Toga, 16 Toga. So I think we probably got a quick glance at this one a moment ago. There we go. You remember this?
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a blast.
This was the toga party on board the amazing cruise where we went to, I don't know, the Caribbean somewhere. And we had that hat just appeared magically.
Really? Are you sure?
I think so.
Wow.
So on that cruise, we had like a little conference room, and we had like a little mini skeptics conference on board the cruise ship, right? We had, I don't know, 50, 60 people attending, something like that. And one time at dinner or at dessert, we got out a couple of books, and you taught me a trick that pretty much every magician is doing some variation of these days with two books. Where
How many years ago was that? 10 or 11 maybe?
That's the sad thing tonight is everything we're talking about is, that was 10 years ago. Nothing's been more recent than that. It was a few years ago. Yeah, I don't know. But the trick is, do you know the trick I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites. Randy does his own version of it, but I've always, I guess I could tip the name of it, but then everybody would be looking for it and find it on the internet. Then there would be even more people doing it. So it's just really simple, but it is very powerful. And you asked me what it's called.
No, I just wanted to see if you could describe it, but if you don't want to, that's fine.
No, what you do is you go to a bookshelf, preferably in somebody's home or on board ship or whatever, and you say, we're going to pick two books. You pick one and I pick one. Okay? Or if you get lucky, you can let the person choose two books, totally random on a shelf of hundreds of books. Then you ask the person, which one do you want? They say, I want this one. You say, okay, you go ahead and hold on to it. I'll use the other book. And now I flip through the pages with my thumb and I say, is this sounding familiar?
Mm-hmm.
I say,
yeah, that's right.
As I flip through, just say stop anytime you want. And then when you say stop, I open the book, I show it to you, and I say, this is page 127. Open to page 127 in the book you chose. Now they open up the book, and you say, go to the top of the page and start reading silently. Don't move your lips, because that makes it easy for me. And as they are reading, you visualize psychically exactly what they're reading, even though they're reading it silently to themselves. And you go about a paragraph in, and then you stop and you say, is that what you just read? And they say yes. Does that sound like it?
Yep, that's the trick.
Trick? It's an old spiritualist thing. What they used to use is the Bible or some religious book, and they would do the same thing, and that would lead into the prayers, and the prayers would lead into the seance. So it was never really played in the old days of spiritualism as a trick. It was more something that was expected of the medium, but it did fool people, absolutely. It still does.
Yeah, so, I mean, you taught it to me, and I think I was able to do it, like, once to my wife, and she was there when you taught it to me. But then it was too complicated. I couldn't do it all in the right order. It was actually pretty complicated. At least it was for me. So I was not able to retain the power.
Well, I'll be happy to show it to you again at SciCon. It only takes a few minutes, and you'll do a face palm and go, oh, that's what the... Because usually with magic, you just forget one key thing. And if you don't have that key connecting thing, then you lose usually the whole flow of the thing. So
now let me ask you something that you...
It's like David Hoy, who was a mentalist in the 40s and 50s, and he became very big, so big that he became a psychic. Big surprise, right?
That seems to be the career path, doesn't it?
Yes.
So let me ask you about something that you tend to always get asked about on these kind of skeptic shows like this. Before you got into the whole, I hate the term skeptic movement, but nevertheless, that's what we're talking about. So before you got into that, you worked for some time at the psychic hotline, right?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us about that, how that worked, and how that was kind of part of your journey?
Well, for me, what happened was I've always been a skeptic. I was never a believer, and I was a magician. My grandfather was a magician, so I never really bought into any of the New Age stuff when it started coming around in the middle 70s. And Geller came around, and it started to really pique my imagination, and a lot of other magicians too, because we were hearing things that he wasn't in a club scene or a party. He was doing this stuff for scientists. So I really decided, I started looking at psychics, and I started learning about cold reading, and I said, if they can do this, I'm a performer already. I can do this and make it even better by mixing in some of the nuances that I know about as a mentalist. So then I said, and once I do this, I want to get to the top of the mountain as far as I can go till I can't stand it. Then I will write a book about it, exposing what I learned. Now, in the case of the 900 lines, that was a huge fraudulent, well, no, I cannot say that. I didn't say that word. It was a huge enterprise that made millions of dollars. And if you read my book, Psychic Blues, you'll find out some of the nefarious methods they used to get money from people. And they ended up, for a lot of reasons, being sued and being bankrupt, and they went out of business. So it's kind of the up and down of the 900 lines in one chapter called The 900 Years. And it was quite an experience, because that's where I really learned probably the most, other than being a bartender for many years. It's where I learned the most about human nature,
Right.
About why and what for and what's going on out there in the real world, because it became a confessional, and it was pretty staggering to listen to some of the stories. And when I did the audiobook, by the way, the audiobook is now available of the book, I did all the voices of all the callers, and that was a lot of fun, because, I had all sorts of rednecks and prissy women and religious people, and I did all the voices myself.
So your job was basically to get money from people by deceiving them into thinking.
On the line for as long as possible.
I mean, did you see your job as deceiving them?
Yes.
Where were you able to do some good, do you think? I mean, what was the most positive outcome of that? Because, I mean, I don't...
I think
Go ahead.
The positive outcome, if you read the book, you will find out. There's a very positive outcome that comes out of it. But I will say, in general, the positive outcome was that as being a skeptic and a magician, I wasn't playing the role of your standard psychic when I was on doing that job. I would actually inject skepticism into it, because I really didn't care whether I held them on the line or not. If I could tell them what I thought they needed to know, not what they wanted to know, and I could do it in 1 minute instead of holding them for 30 minutes, I'd do it. Like people would say, give me some lotto numbers. And I go, you want lotto numbers? 1, 6, 7, 12, 14, 9, and 23. And they go, gee, man, thanks. And I'd say, I didn't say they were winning lotto numbers. And I would also always try and inject some kind of skeptical note, like, you don't really need me to do this. You can do this. So there was some good, because by being the kind of psychic that I was, I got more calls in the end anyway, because people can tell when you're stringing them along, and shit.
Uh-oh.
It's them, not us.
Yeah, we're having some buffering issues here. There you go.
I tell somebody what they need to know in 5 minutes. They keep calling me back. So it was an odd situation, because I became one of their top 15 psychics.
Did you notice any Did you notice any commonalities in the people who called you? Things that they were looking for? Was there an average caller, a median caller, the usual thing?
Not really. There was a plethora of just every different. I had strip teasers. I had dancers. I had astronauts. I had businessmen. I had lawyers. There was no real one demographic strata. It came from everywhere, and that was due to the fact that by picking up your phone, you were given a sort of anonymity which you wouldn't get if you walked into a psychic shop.
Right, but not in terms of their demographics, but in terms of what they were hoping to get from you. I mean,
That's hard to say, because they just wanted knowledge, and they accepted the fact that I was an expert. So, and one of the fun things that I did way back when was Psychic Friends allowed you to change your skill or your expertise on the screen when people, or on the phone when people called in. So, for example, 1 week I could be a tarot reader, 1 week I could be a runestone reader, but my favorite was when I get kind of bored with it, I would put ghost hunter. And then I'd spend a week or two sitting in front of my fireplace at night in the dark, listening to the most incredible stories I have ever heard from people who otherwise sounded totally normal. And you have to think, I was sitting there, they're paying $3.99 a minute to tell me this story. Why would you do that? Probably because they're crazy. But, and then at the end of their story, they would say, what am I going to do? And I'm supposed to be the expert, so I'd be like, I really don't know. I'd have to think of something, to sound like an expert. Like, when this happens again, you need to call me back. But it was pretty eye-opening to realize how many people were out there having some sort of experience. And of course, I couldn't explain the science to them, because it's like when you have sleep paralysis. If somebody doesn't know about the science and you try and tell them, oh, it's just your body doing that, it's difficult. So that was really eye-opening. So that was not a demographic, because again, that covered everybody, but it was a commonality that I really got the most out of, because people wanted to believe more in ghosts than any of the other stuff. Otherwise it was just love and money and travel and health. And I never took legal or health questions. I learned that a long time ago. So it was mostly just money and love, money and love, money and love. Standard riff.
Now, what about the other people who worked there, the other people who had the same job as you? Did any of them believe themselves to have actual psychic powers?
Oh, I'm sure there were. I'm sure there were a percentage, but as I've spoken to other people, probably 95% of the people who I have experienced, and again, this is in my experience, not anybody else's, 95% of them are true charlatans who know that they're just in it for the money and they're just raking it in, and they stay on the line all day and all night. Now, the other 10%, 2.5% or 5%. I said 95, didn't I? The other 5% is 2.5 made up of people who are delusional, who may be off their meds or schizophrenic, or just they really believe they can do things like move things with their mind and dowsing and all these psychic things. But really, it's all in their own head, because when I asked them to go outside of their head and did you have any external proof, they never did or never have. The other 2.5 is made up of really compassionate, intuitive people who just found a way to make some money by telling people their truth, their version of the truth. And that's why I say my book is called Psychic Blues, because that's the blues part of the story, is when you balance the 2.5% against the 97.5%, it's not good odds, and you better just stay away from it. But I don't see anything wrong if you find somebody who can give you intuitive an intuitive opinion, and they don't say come back in a week and bring a sock full of cash. And they, in fact, the best intuitives I ever met said, I don't ever want to see you again. I've told you everything I can tell you. Bye-bye. That's a different story, but it doesn't weigh out very well. It's not a good bet.
Well, Mark, we have gone through our half hour. It flew by fairly quickly. I want to thank you very much. Psychic Blues is the name of your book, and is that available wherever books are sold?
You can get it on Amazon, but I'm highly recommending getting the audiobook on Audible.
Okay.
You can get that on Facebook too, Amazon. It's because what it was is when I took Psychic Blues to Feral House Books, the editor edited about a third of it out, and that part of the book, I've heard some reviews where people said, he's really nasty, he's horrible. Well, that's because the editor wanted it to be a very dark character. So the original manuscript has a lot more nuance about what was going on in my life, what were my influences, how did this happen. I put all that back in and I read it myself.
Cool.
And by now, there's a kind of tone in the book of disgust. I don't know, because I've been through this so many times now that my personality today comes through. And I put in music and sound effects, and I'm really proud of it.
Well, thank you. I'm afraid I've got to cut you off there, but
you got to cut me off? All right. Well,
yeah, thanks very much, Mark. Psychic Blues, everyone, check it out.
.com.
Okay, sir. All right. See ya.